Can Europe really become a global power? In a highly publicised speech, French President Emmanuel Macron recently urged the European Union to take a more assertive position on the world stage. On paper, it should in fact be a major player. However, it faces several serious problems. So, does Europe really have the potential to be a global power? And just how can it go about becoming one? Hello and welcome, I'm James Kerr-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict and security. The past decade has seen a dramatic shift in international relations. The unipolar moment that followed the Cold War, when the United States stood as the unrivaled global hegemon, has now gone. Instead, China's dramatic rise has fundamentally altered the balance of global power. Meanwhile, India's economic and population growth have fueled speculation that it too will become a key player. All the while, a growing number of regional powers are seeking greater influence. So far, though, much of the debate about who will be the dominant actors in the 21st century has focused on states. The European Union is rarely considered. Instead, it's seen as an economic bloc rather than a geopolitical actor. But can it now change this? If a new multipolar international system is about concentrations of power, whether economic, political, technological or military, then the EU clearly qualifies as a candidate. But just how can it convert all this into actual global influence? With 27 members, the European Union stretches from Ireland in the west to Cyprus in the east, and from Finland in the north to Greece in the south. Although smaller than Russia, China and the United States, it would still rank amongst the world's top 10 countries if it were in fact a unified state. Likewise, its population of 450 million would put it in third place after China and India, and ahead of the United States. As for economic strength, it competes directly with the United States and China as one of the world's top 3 economies, ranking second or third depending on exchange rates and measurements used. But while already significant on these measures, it's set to grow even larger. Most of the countries of the Western Balkans, as well as Moldova, Georgia, Turkey and Ukraine, are officially candidates for membership. If they do eventually become members, they'll significantly extend the EU's territorial reach, population and strategic depth. But if the EU has many of the traditional attributes of a great power, why has it never in fact emerged as one? To understand this, we need to take a look at its origins, structure and development. The European Union began to emerge in the aftermath of the Second World War. Aiming to prevent another devastating conflict, the leaders of France, West Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Luxembourg and Belgium created the European Economic Community in 1957. By closely integrating their economies, they hoped that war would not only become impossible, but also unthinkable. Since then, the project has steadily expanded. In addition to welcoming many new members, cooperation has steadily grown into new areas ranging from agriculture and policing through to transport and climate policy. But while the Union has taken on many symbols of statehood, including a common currency, a single market, a unified trade policy, a flag, and even EU citizenship, it remains a group of sovereign states. In this sense, it's perhaps best understood as a political community. Although its members exercise many powers at the European level, they retain control in many key areas. For instance, and crucial for this story, while close cooperation has emerged in foreign policy, final decision-making remains with national governments who retain a veto over common EU positions. Likewise, while there's the European External Action Service, the EU's diplomatic body, each country retains its own foreign ministry. In defence, the situation is even more devolved. There's no European army. Instead, each country retains its own distinct armed forces. But it's not just about structure or process. In terms of substance, the EU has usually taken a very different approach from regular countries. When the EU has engaged in international affairs, it's usually done so in ways that explicitly reject the logic of power politics. From the start, it tried to move beyond the military rivalry that had devastated the continent. Instead, it emphasised economic cooperation, democracy and human rights. As a result, while most EU member states joined the US-led NATO and certain countries maintained strong armed forces, the European Union as a whole presented itself as a champion of international law, multilateral institutions and the peaceful resolution of disputes. And it's this hybrid nature of the EU, combined with its rejection of power politics, that explains the Union's current situation. While it's become an economic giant, it's never emerged as a traditional great power. For many years, this approach appeared to work. Having become a model of peaceful integration in Western Europe after the Second World War, the EU stabilised and integrated much of Central and Eastern Europe at the end of the Cold War. However, everything has now changed. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 shattered assumptions about lasting peace in Europe. Since then, the second Trump administration has become far more confrontational towards its European partners, threatening to annex Greenland and suggesting that the old security guarantees no longer apply. All this means that while it still presents itself as a strong advocate for multilateralism, the war in Ukraine and a shift in US policy has forced the EU to rethink its place in the world. And it's in this context that Macron and others have argued that Europe must think and act like a great power. So, can Europe now become a global power? In truth, it depends on several distinct factors. For a start, it'll need to find a way to act more decisively. Foreign and security policy decisions in the EU still require a broad consensus amongst member states. Given their distinct national interests, historical relationships and fundamental political differences, the European Union has far too often been hampered by slow and cautious decision-making. Indeed, because foreign policy remains a veto area, a single government can delay or dilute or even stop collective action. This is causing considerable problems, especially when certain leaders, such as Hungary's Viktor Orbán, seem more interested in staying close to Putin and Trump than in defending European values. The second constraint is military capacity. The EU has no single unified army, and defence remains primarily a national responsibility. Collective defence is still anchored in NATO rather than the Union. However, even here, there's reasons for hope. Taken together, Europe's military strength is considerable. Their combined defence spending far exceeds that of any country other than the United States, surpassing China, Russia and India. Meanwhile, their combined armed forces number well over 1 million personnel, again putting the European Union in the top 4 worldwide. On paper, the EU could become one of the world's leading military actors, but again, it's hampered by fragmentation. Capabilities are dispersed across national forces, equipment isn't fully interoperable, and procurement remains largely national, and strategic cultures vary significantly. While steps are being taken to fix some of these, without unified command structures and clear political direction, Europe's combined weight doesn't translate into coherent military power. All the while, there are still other challenges, both internal and external. For example, public opinion isn't always supportive of deeper integration, particularly in sensitive areas such as defence. On top of this, several EU member states remain formally neutral and show no signs of wanting to give this up. Finally, being a global power isn't just about capabilities, it's also about perceptions. While the United States and China can project their strength, the EU can't, at least not yet, and in ways that it needs to. And even if it starts to unify strategically and militarily, it'll take time for this to be understood globally. But all this said, it would be a mistake to dismiss the EU's potential. In the 21st century, Power isn't measured only in tanks and aircraft carriers, as much as they may still matter. Economic capabilities and the ability to shape global norms and regulations are also significant. The EU remains the world's largest single market, and access to it gives Brussels significant leverage. Its rules on data protection, environmental standards and competition policy often become global benchmarks, forcing companies worldwide to adapt. Likewise, Europe could well be an attractive partner for many countries around the world, fearful of the direction taken by China and the United States. Ultimately, though, whether the European Union can become a global power depends less on its capabilities than on its political will. Its size, wealth and institutional reach aren't in doubt. The real question is whether member states can learn from their past experiences in many other areas and accept that acting together on foreign and security policy enhances rather than constrains their sovereignty. In a world of competing great and regional powers, ever closer unity may remain the single most effective way for the Union and its members to defend their interests. But underneath all this, Macron's call reflects a fundamental dilemma. Europe has the instruments of power, but must now decide how far it's willing to integrate politically and militarily to use them truly effectively. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.